Hello ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar brought to you by sharedserviceslink.com and sponsored by Basware. Today, over the next 60 minutes, we're going to be honing in on a topic that is very important for a lot of shared services leaders right now, which is basically how to standardize and automate processes, but really within the context of having a multi-system or a multi-ERP environment. So my name is Susie West and I'm your host for today. I'm the founder and CEO at sharedserviceslink.com, and I'm very pleased to be presenting as my guest speakers for today Mark Purser, who's Finance Systems Manager at Segro, and Karen Airy, who's the Marketing and Communications Manager at Basware. And you have a role to play as well in the next 60 minutes, which is to make sure that you feed your questions throughout the webinar itself. And I will be taking your questions and putting them to our guest speakers in the last 10 minutes of this webinar. So just before I introduce our first guest speaker, let's just focus for a moment, if we will, on the context, why we're having this conversation today. So the ERP topic is becoming more and more important to shared services leaders. Often we find that an ERP integration and the shared services migration will actually happen at the same time. It is so hand in glove with the shared services development and the shared services journey. And often some people do say that the success of their shared services organization does hang quite critically on their ERP implementation and setup and rollout and use of the ERP. But there is this burning question, which is, because standardization of process is so important to shared services leaders, and the burning question is, do you really have to be operating off a single platform in order to get a very, very standardized process? Or can you actually standardize processes very elegantly in a multi-ERP environment? So really it begs the question, is the quest for a single ERP worth it in order for your shared services organization to be successful? Or is there indeed another way? So that's really what we're going to be digging into and investigating over the next 60 minutes. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce our first guest presenter, Karen Airy from Basware. Over to you, please, Karen.
Thank you, Susie, and hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for this topic. As Susie has said, I'm Marketing Communication Manager for Basware, but part of my role, and a very important part, is working closely with our customers to understand the issues they're facing and how different approaches have allowed to transform the way that finance and procurement work across the organisation, through shared services or through direct organisations, and transform the way that they work with finance and procurement and the benefits that they achieve beyond their own functions. I'd like to take a few moments to quickly introduce Basware as an organisation, and then I'll discuss today's theme in more detail. So Basware was founded back in 1985 and was first to market with invoice workflow technologies back in the late 1990s. Since this time, Basware has consistently been ranked number 1 or 2 by independent analysts such as Forrester and Gartner in the purchase-to-pay and supplier network space. We have over 1,400 employees covering over 30 countries and users in greater than 95 countries. Our 2012 sales were over 110 million euros. And one important point at Basware is that year over year, we put somewhere in the order of 16 to 18% of our sales directly back into R&D to continue to build our products and services for our customers to ensure we continue to drive industry-leading value. Our supplier network is focused on driving significantly more value out of our purchase-to-pay platforms, or whatever platform you're using, through the addition of efficiency and improved supplier collaboration. So what do our solutions actually deliver? Well, we drive financial performance forward, and here you can see just a small example of the type of organisations we work with and some of the things we've achieved with these customers. So highlighting a few of these in a little more detail, Toshiba, utilising Basware's e-invoice sending services and have reduced their invoicing cost by 75%. Ritter Sport deployed Basware's e-procurement solutions to gain better control and visibility across their spend reduced third-party spend by 10%. Loomis Sales now pay over 85% of their suppliers within 7 to 10 days to capture early payment discounts. And Heineken process over 90% of their invoices without any manual intervention whatsoever. So again, looking in a little more detail about our offering, Basware provides solutions across the full purchase-to-pay cycle through both procurement, invoice automation, e-invoicing, to enable better buying and better selling, and better connected commerce. From a sourcing and procurement perspective, we work to create visibility through spend reporting and metrics across PO and non-PO based spend in critical performance dashboards. We improve supply relationships, efficiency and content management through our supplier networking tools. We ensure compliance through easy-to-use integrated tools that allow people in roles across an organization to buy in a more compliant and effective way. From the AP automation perspective, we look to remove paper from the process and enable automated matching and exception workflow, offering greater efficiency, compliance, and visibility. Overarching the purchase-to-pay process, our analytics solution provides role-based reporting, making financial data that empowers people throughout your business to make better financial decisions. Our commerce network connects buyers and suppliers to the transfer of e-invoices, e-orders, and we enable companies to take advantage of e-invoicing by offering a variety of flexible services which appeal to organizations whether they're sending and receiving high invoice volumes or smaller numbers, and maximize their ability to send and receive e-invoices by providing an open network which allows them to reach the maximum numbers of partners as possible. So to summarize, what else sets Basware apart? We have best-in-class purchase-to-pay processes and provide role-based user experience across the entire purchase-to-pay cycle and offer anytime and anywhere access to tasks and data via mobile and tablet applications. We also maximize our time to value by offering standardized products and service packages wherever possible. We have a globally connected commerce network, which we've already talked about, but we have over 1.2 million end users across over 2,000 customers, and we work with 160 interoperability partners, and there's a spend in excess of $420 billion on Basware's network each year. Our solutions offer easy and intelligent collaboration with a rich suite of services, enabling electronic transaction exchange for any size and type of company. Social media collaboration tools now further improve the query resolution and relationship between buyers and suppliers and between finance, procurement, and the rest of the organization. So looking more closely at the problem that we're addressing, transactional chaos exists across key financial processes. There's a wealth of causes for this transactional chaos that companies experience. Error-prone paper processes dominate, data is often held in silos, and there are myriad of different processes and systems in use. All of this contributes to limited visibility, impacting forecasting and cash. In a recent survey we conducted, 71% of CFOs said that greater levels of reliance between different finance systems within their organization present cash flow visibility challenges. And it seems that the more systems we have, the harder it is to get a clear picture of the financial situation. And no wonder then that in the same survey, 62% claim connecting disparate parts of the purchase and payment process within their business is of critical importance for this year. As CFOs seek to gain greater control over cash flow, the financial supply chain and future growth, the success and failure of managing these competing factors is bound by the systems and processes they use. Whether you're a smaller organization looking to better forecast cash and do more with the same amount of resources, or a large multinational looking to reduce cost savings, the bottom line is that paper document handling and siloed information create challenges which require simplification. And why is this such a priority for CFOs? Why does it hurt? Well, it's because this chaos really has a knock-on effect. Many of us are familiar with the issues surrounding paper-based finance and procurement processes and disparate systems, the settlement delays, high errors, inefficiency, and maverick purchasing that exists. But what's the knock-on effect at a strategic level? The lack of agility to deal with market change, which is critical at these times, late visibility into working capital position, uncontrolled spend and no ability to put the brakes on in tough times, and an uncompetitive cost base, all things which have a significant impact on your organization's ability to remain competitive and agile. So why is this transaction chaos so hard to solve? Well, firstly, there's people, their targets, their goals, and this can be a significant barrier. We've recently been holding a series of seminars which specifically look at the issue of financial collaboration. And at all of these events, we talk in great detail with the delegates about improving collaboration and some of the barriers to this. And even though organizations and individuals have a willingness to collaborate more effectively and now recognize the issues and see the benefits of more effective purchase-to-pay process, one of the biggest barriers is still this misalignment of departmental and functional goals. Everyone was still striving for different targets. The one common area of conflict we can see from this diagram here is the balance between procurement finding headline savings and finance pushing out payment terms to improve working capital. Finding a better way to work with suppliers to optimize terms is difficult when targets are misaligned and there's a lack of visibility between functions. Aligned goals and technology allow procurement and finance to work effectively together to agree and optimize payment terms. Underpinning this chaos, we also have the systems landscape to consider. Fragmented and disconnected functional systems cause collaboration issues within organizations and hamper visibility. An approach centered around ERP can make change slow and expensive. Looking further afield, there are interoperability challenges between organizations transferring data and legal, cultural, and commercial obstacles. Organizations need to have their long-term objectives in mind when looking at the solutions that support the businesses. Planning for growth and change is essential, and automating poor processes produces errors and rework and generally fosters poor performance. Throwing technology at a poor process is no good unless you tackle the control, compliance, and visibility elements and keep in mind the direction that the organization is taking longer term. So why can't we afford to ignore these issues any longer? Lack of agility really hurts in a downturn. Not being able to have visibility and insight into your cash position is a risk. Globalization creates more complexity with multiple jurisdictions, languages, and currencies in play. And weak control of your supply chain. Supplier information effectively working is essential. Inefficiency and lack of visibility loses you money in a variety of different areas. And risk is rife, not just in terms of lack of compliance and company policy, but in your exposure to potential fraud as well. So at this point, I'm going to pass back to Susie, who's going to ask a couple of questions.
Thank you very much, Karen. So coming up on your screen now, I'd just like to find out how many ERPs you're currently running finance off today. So is it 1? Is it 2 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, or is it 21 or more? So if you can let us know how many systems or accounting systems or ERPs you're actually operating off today or running finance off today. We do like to try and get these numbers nice and high, so if you haven't already responded, please do so. Are you running off 1 ERP, 2 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, or 21 or more? If you haven't already responded, I urge you to please do so. Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the results coming up on your screen now, please. So 15% of you, interestingly, operate off 1. So and we've got just shy of really 50% of you, 46% of you coming in at running between 2 and 5. In our experience, this seems to be where most shared services organizations seem to be. It's in the 2 to 5 range. 23% are operating off 6 to 10, and the remainder 16% off 11 ERPs or accounting systems or more. So thank you for that. I'm just going to move on to the second of the back-to-back polls coming up now, please. So this is multiple selection, choosing no more than 3. What are the key issues that running off this number of ERPs present? So maybe, I think I'm really calling to the people that run off 2 or more. So those that responded, the 15% that responded to just the 1 ERP, maybe just don't respond to this one for the time being. So please tick to the 3 that really call out to you. So poor visibility of data, various processes to support different systems, maybe high cost of system management, or perhaps inefficient training approach because many people need to be trained on many systems, or poor system of poor visibility of transaction flow. So what we mean by there is not really the data as such and calling together the data and not a case of not having a single kind of source of truth, but this is more not really being able to call together at one time exactly where the bottlenecks are in your process. So it's having poor visibility of transaction flow. If you haven't already responded, please do so, and we will be closing the poll very shortly. So closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the results coming up on your screen now. So you can see from that, interestingly, there is an out-and-out winner and there's an out-and-out loser. So coming in at 85%, various processes to support different systems, which is really why we're on this webinar today. So I'm glad that this subject matter is going to be very useful for you. And at the lower end of that, in terms of challenges, we've got inefficient training approaches. Training is required on multiple systems. And the mid-ground really is poor visibility of data, high cost of system management. So interesting results. Back to you, please, Karen.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you. And as we've seen now, I think people have identified with similar issues, as certainly as we're discussing here. So when we look at those common challenges in a typical organisation, we see that trying to gain alignment across multiple sites, different countries, and sometimes even different business types within an organisation. Typically, people are running multiple systems, that's ERPs, accounting systems, bespoke and industry-specific solutions. We want to standardize activities that are voluminous and repetitive, which may be being performed in different locations, often in a similar but not same way. And for a time, organizations, when they were looking at standardization, looked to centralize operations or standardize via the ERP solution and use that to provide a common operating template and system, and then considered automation for process efficiency. However, increasingly, and certainly across our customer base, we're seeing organizations that are looking to automation to provide the standard. So rather than standardizing with or after centralization with a view to automating at a later date, they're using automation to provide a global template. This approach provides a greater degree of flexibility, achieves that standardization efficiency earlier in the process, and allows visibility and control across the organization against the backdrop of multiple ERPs and accounting systems. By working outside the ERP, Basware has the flexibility to offer customers stability and control against a changing systems landscape as their companies evolve and grow. Some of our customers implement Basware processing with a single ERP. Some automate across multiple systems and then still move to that single ERP, allowing Basware to provide a standard throughout the change process. And other customers, particularly those in shared services, maintain more than one ERP or have need to connect new customers on differing systems and can do so under the Basware platform. Especially important for organizations growing or expanding so that new divisions can be up and running as soon as possible. As always, when approaching this, it's important to look at the long-term objectives of the organization and take on board the flexibility of a solution to work as you want whilst enforcing and driving standards. And to visualize how this works, we can look at the purchase to pay process here. You can see that this sits, looking at the Basware, just concentrating on procurement and invoice automation at this point. But looking at how this sits, you can see it sits across multiple ERPs, transferring master data and information on suppliers, coding rules, approval authorities, and payments. And our application acts as a hub between the Basware applications across purchase to pay and an organization's application landscape. And this enables systems to be safely added or replaced, which ensures flexibility and better capitalization of existing investments. To see how this works in practice, we can use the examples of some of our customers. For ADT Tyco, they needed to boost productivity within their accounts payable, increase visibility across their multiple ERPs. They have sites throughout the UK, and they use Basware to consolidate their processing locations into a single shared service centre. They reduced their invoice cycle times by 75% and gained overall savings of over €400,000 in the first year alone. They're now undertaking further rollouts and bringing in additional integrations with SAP and BARN, again easily hooking in other ERPs whilst Basware provides the core functionality. Heineken automated the receiving of their 430,000 purchase invoices while seamlessly integrating with 5 separate ERP instances. They also gained automatic matching of 97% of their invoices and have been able to achieve ongoing savings through process improvements. And to look at a rather complex system landscape, we can look at this slide from ABB for their UK operation alone at the start of their project. They utilised Basware in establishing their shared service centre to provide consistency through their migration from these multiple ERPs and systems across to a single instance to SAP, and continue to use Basware now to provide purchase-to-pay expertise that can't be matched by their current ERP application. These cases we have spoken about before with Shared Services Link, and they presented their journeys and their stories as well. So I would recommend looking through, not only for other cases through the Basware site, but through Shared Services Link, you'll be able to find certainly stories about ADT and Tyco and ABB, where they talk about how they approach this process as well. But certainly for today, we're going to look in more detail at the how Segro approached this challenge in their project. And I would now like to introduce Mark Purser, who will describe their particular approach, standardizing process against a multi-system structure. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everyone. So let me introduce myself. I'm Mark Purser, in charge of the IT application portfolio within Segro. I'm very pleased today to present you the system changes we have been completed over the past years to standardize processes in a multi-ERP environment and explain the rationale behind these changes. I will also disclose where we are today, highlight some of the challenges we had to face, and conclude by disclosing some of our lessons learned. But before going into detail, let me first present you Segro as a company. So Segro operates on the real estate business. So basically, in short, we own properties and we rent those properties, which is giving us some recurring revenues. Our property portfolio is mostly made of modern warehousing, light industrials, and data center properties. You can see some examples on the slides here. Our total portfolio value is about £4.7 billion for an overall space of 5.3 million square meters of built space. And we are serving about 1,300 customers spread around a diverse range of industry sectors. Segro is a listed company on the London Stock Exchange, and we are operating in different key locations. So let me focus for a second on that one. That will help understanding some of the reorganization we have been through recently. So as you can see on the slide, we are operating in 8 key countries, such as the UK, so mostly properties around Heathrow, Park Royal, Greenford, and outside London region. We have properties in Germany, in the Rhine rural region, near towns like Düsseldorf, Frankfurt, and also properties in the Berlin area. We are operating also in France, mostly around Paris, and in Poland, in Warsaw, Poznan, Lodz, and Silesia. To sustain our local business in these different regions, obviously we have several local offices. So now that you have a better idea on what Segro is, let me now move on what I call the system journeys. To start with, I think the best is to go back in history for 5 to 6 years where we were at this point in time. So historically, the Segro group has been growing over time through organic growth, mostly in the UK, but also through acquisition of competitors in continental Europe. So from an organizational perspective, there were local teams dealing with letting, property management, and obviously doing some local accounting. So from a system perspective, we were having scattered system, mostly local packages to handle accounting, so software like Sage, and we were running Agresso in the UK. We were also a company being mostly Excel driven. Most of the finance consolidation, as an example, was really a tedious exercise with a risk of missing deadline to disclose numbers of the market. So having now the understanding of the sea change a few years ago, you can easily understand business pain we were facing at this point in time. So that explains the reason why we initiated a re-engineering program that I will further detail now. So we took the decision to initiate a complete re-engineering program across the group, which we started end of 2008. To be more specific, we remodeled our complete processes and removed our local systems and replaced by a couple of specialized dedicated ERPs. So we made a choice to pick up specialized software by opposition of our more standard packages such as SAP to limit the level of customization and use native functionalities as much as we can. So we decided to move on with MRI. So MRI is the ERP we are using to manage our portfolio, to cover the order to cash process and manage the accounting. We also decided to pick up Basware to cover or to handle our purchase to pay process. One of the other reasons we selected MRI and Basware was also because they were offering a SaaS offer. So we wanted basically to move away from self-hosting of systems and to move to SaaS to get a better control of our IT costs and get better system performance. So during these 4 years, we did a massive change, which I will summarize, in the next slide that I call from past to present. So over this journey, we made changes in key areas. The first is the process. So we definitely moved away from local process to commonality and having standard process in place across the group. That was really a main achievement. At the same time, obviously, we implemented common platforms, so we get rid of all the legacy systems to move to the 2 pieces of software that I mentioned before, MRI and Basware. And at the same time, we picked up these software and we set away from some sort of old user interface, Windows, to move to more web sort of new world, which made the life of the user more easy by being more intuitive softwares in place. Lastly, as I said before, we changed our IT approach and moved away from self-hosted system to be more in the SaaS model. So we enter more in a world where we can actually buy functionalities as we need them. So the consequence of these is we remove legacy systems and running on old technology and eradicate the risk of having no support in case of system failure. So what systems do we have in place now? So you have the next slide which summarizes what these 2 systems and the way they interface to each other. So we have basically MRI at the bottom, again handling our portfolio, supporting the order to cash process and managing all the accounting. So accounts payable, accounts receivable, general accounting. And we have, on top of that, we have Basware, which is the blue rectangle. Basware, which is supporting out the purchase to pay process. So let's detail the P2P process for a minute. So basically, to start with, so we have the procurement management, that's the amber square that you have, which is relatively simple and standard. So creating the purchase order, which is sent to internal approval based on delegation of authority, then generating the actual order, which is sent to the supplier. Then the supplier obviously delivers the goods or the service, and eventually send his invoice. And instead of sending in the invoice to a Segro office, he sends the invoice to a third-party company, which is scanning this paper document or putting into the system the digital invoice, if the supplier sends digital invoice. Then the system will capture the content of the invoice and populate automatically the different fields, like the value of the invoice, the tax of the invoice, the supplier, the due date, and so on and so forth. Then the next step is this invoice is matched automatically against the purchase order and goes for automatic confirmation for the requester who created the purchase order in the first place. When it's agreed, then it goes out of Basware and goes down to accounts payable in MRI. So as you can see, both systems are interconnected. You have some of the master data which are still maintained in MRI, which are uploaded into Basware. And then you have some of more transactional data, like invoices, for instance, which are going out of Basware, going down into MRI in accounting. Just to give you an idea, in terms of volume, we are talking about 40,000 invoices per annum across the entire group. Let's move on now in highlighting some of the lessons learned, and let's start with what went well. So the key positive points we received out of this, this journey, the first one is we had a quite good assimilation of the procurement management process in general. So all the PO handling, the approval, and the PO confirmation was fine, and the users were quickly going and learning the system. It was a bit more time-consuming for the invoice confirmation in terms of user acceptance, but overall the user were adopting the system quite rapidly. And the second key point is on the technical side, we experienced good quality of the scanning and the character capture. So just to give you back into the context, you have to realize that we are dealing with 8 different languages. So what the system is basically doing, so when it receives an invoice, it has to understand what, for instance, invoice is by opposition of a credit note. So invoice is obviously invoice in English, but it can be facture in French, or it can be Rechnung in German. So the system has to be smart enough to understand based on keywords and to understand what the different information are on the paper invoice, capture those information and feed those into the system. So we were quite, I should say, anxious before implementing, but we had overall quite a good good success rate in terms of scanning and capturing information. System performance, overall good, or at least in line with our expectation. We suffered in the past with our legacy system with bad performance from time to time. Now that was one of the drivers we decided to move to SaaS, and here the system performance for MRI and for Basware were in line with, again, our expectation. The last key positive points, that's more during the project cycle. We were quite pleased to have the Basware consulting team offering a good level of expertise, and they could find a reasonable balance between the use of standard functionalities and level of customization of the product. Now, there are still obviously some areas where we could have done better, which is now what I will disclose. Next slide. Okay, so the invoice processing, so not the invoice confirmation, but the invoice processing, which is now falling into the accounts payable team, is an area where we need attention really. So the accounts payable team is now in charge of monitoring daily the invoice process flow and ensuring that the matching between the invoice and the purchase order is working as expected. So if you have, for instance, an invoice which is coming through without any purchase order mentioned to it, that means that this invoice must be entered manually. So it comes down to the accounts payable team to redirect this invoice to the proper person or proper organization to create the PO retroactively and then running the matching manually. So in a way, if you like, they are in a more central position or roles in organizations in terms of coordinating the purchase to pay information flow. Second point of attention is the matching rate. So the matching rate is a key indicator in terms of efficiency of the system and organization. The highest matching rates we have, the least manual manipulation we end up with. So that's still an area where we need to grow in the future and improve in the coming months. The last point is that we have been obliged to customize Basware to come with some of our business. Just a couple of examples. We don't, for instance, do any good receipts in our business, so we are obliged to remove this stage in the overall purchase to pay flow. Likewise, we don't handle any quantity, so we have basically to ignore all the information where we have to enter the quantity. So again, bear in mind that some of the countries, such as the UK, are using the system for a few months now. So this is definitely a process and a system which is under consideration and where we want to optimize over time. So moving to the benefits received now. We are in a position where we definitely get rid of most of the paper invoice handling. This is a really important step forward, and especially in large countries where we have several offices, say UK, Germany, and Poland. So before Basware, the accounting department in one office was actually obliged to mail the paper invoices in the other offices to get those invoices reviewed and confirmed. So that was really a long and manual process with the risk of losing invoices. Now everything is in the system, and anyone can access real-time those invoices into the system. Second point, all invoices, well, as I say, are in the system obviously, so which helps the visibility and traceability of the information. So whenever, for instance, a supplier calls to know whether his invoice has been paid, then anyone in the organization can connect to Basware and check and confirm where it stands. Whereas before, this was only the accounting department which was having this information. Also, we have improved process based on automatic email alerts. So that way the manager are aware when they have a purchase order to approve or invoice to confirm. So these help definitely reducing the overall purchase order handling and invoice processing. As I said, that's not the end of the journey, so we are still expecting additional benefits in the future. The matching rate is one of the key elements. I mentioned that before. It's still a way to go, and that's an area where we want to improve. The positive side of it when we have a better matching rate is that we would obviously have better allocation of our internal resources across the group. An area where we want to do probably better is also the integration between our two core systems, MRI and Basware. We suffered during the implementation of technical issues. We are now in a position where they are basically exchanging data on a real-time basis, but we want to be a bit beyond and have more integrated packages. What also we want to do is to open access to some of our systems, and Basware is a key example here, to third parties. So it's obviously what we have in place when it comes to day-to-day operations, like property maintenance, but there are some areas when it comes to projects, so building properties. Building properties is really a project time frame where suddenly you have much bigger volume of suppliers participating and doing business with Segro. And instead of having manual document exchanges, we'd like to open our system to these suppliers. Lastly, we want to improve our team efficiency. So that's something we keep in mind, having some sort of service center oriented across countries. I think we need to first improve our system, which is the first step, and then move to more these shared service center sort of organization. I'm reaching now the end of our presentation. I'd like to conclude with some key messages here. So all of our efforts to redefine our processes and install new systems was definitely a must and an investment for the future. And really one of the typical examples I'm using quite frequently is KPIs. So how can you have reliable KPIs, either for internal use or for the market, if you do not have common database with shared data and agreed definition? We were struggling with this area before. We are now in a better position to get to define new additional KPIs and roll those KPIs across the group. Standardization helps us to improve our internal control and the traceability of the information. So this is obviously especially true when we talk about giving money to suppliers, typically, where we must ensure that we have the right control in place at the right level of organization. Reduce costs, and I'm sure it's a common objective for most of the companies, is, well, implementing software is obviously an investment where we had some tangible and intangible benefits. I mentioned obviously some of these in my past slides, but we expect to have more in the future. And one of the areas where we want to have better visibility, the cost structure, and want to optimize also our internal use of our organizational resources. Now that we have our back office in place, so we are thinking of giving access to information to our partners, suppliers, tenants. We definitely could not have done that with our old systems, and our business is growing such in a way that we have more and more international partners, and having a common platform helps us to have this access deployed across several countries. Having said that, we need to keep quite vigilant in a couple of two points. One is the architecture, where we need to keep consistency over time over the two systems. So consistency of technology, consistency of data, consistency of processes. It's obviously better when you have only one ERP. When you have several ERPs discussing together, you have to consider it from a global perspective. The second point of attention is to stay as much as standard as we can. So if you remember the starting point of my presentation, I said we decommission highly customized systems. So obviously we would like to avoid repeating the same error again. Right, this is now the end of my presentation, handing back over to Susie.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. So just before we go into questions, we've just got our third and final poll of the day, please. So coming up on your screen now. What is the solution you are looking to take in the medium to long term? Are you looking to indeed consolidate your ERPs, keep your number of ERPs, but invest in middleware that can really help the systems liaise, or no obvious solution for the time being? So we're only at about a very small percentage of you having responded, so if you could share that with us, we are going to be sharing the results with you. We're at 42% of you responding, so if you could all take a moment and just respond to that question for me, please. I'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the results coming up on your screen now. So 42% of you are quite intent to consolidate ERPs, and in order 33% say that you have no obvious solution in mind for the time being, and 25% are thinking about keeping the number of ERPs that you have but investing in some kind of middleware. So thank you very much. Right, let's move directly to questions. So lots of questions for you, Mark. So Mark, if I can ask you to answer this question specifically regarding business case. A number of questions around business case. First of all, how did you actually financially justify the investment? What were the financial outputs? And second of all, what was your period of return of investment?
Right. Financially, we balanced the cost of maintaining our legacy. That was more on the financial side of it, what I call the tangible side of it, versus investing in the new packages. For more the intangible sort of benefits, that's something which was also taken into consideration. And there was a list of what I call business pains we experienced over the past year before we started this re-engineering program, which also were put, let's say, in a balance and made the decision rather easy. Now, this came together with a change of the organization and the management, which had to, as a strategy of the company, to develop it at the international level. So developing internationally means that you need to have a better control of your operations, better system with better systems in order to get more real-time sort of KPIs out of your system to manage your company.
Okay, and in terms of the ROI period, were you looking at 18 months? Was it 24 months? What was the period over which you saw that the return come back?
No, return investment is a bit longer. We looked for 3 years, 3 to 4 years return on investment.
And do you feel like you're on track for that? Is that something that you're heading towards?
Heading towards definitely. We had some countries deployed recently in early 2013, so it's probably too early to actually confirm that firmly, but we have good hope that we'll reach our initial objectives. Okay.
So one viewer has asked, if you can do this, that would be useful. If not, we might need to take it offline. But they specifically asked for the cost of clearing an invoice. So you talked about KPIs, Mark. Have you got your cost per invoice that you use as a KPI?
No, I would need. I don't have these.
Okay.
That was my.
Okay, but maybe if you can retrieve that and maybe share it with that viewer, that might be very useful if you're happy to do that. And then again, directed at Mark. So one viewer is asking, clearly the purchase to pay process is an example where an additional system overlay can absolutely help standardize processes. Can you share an example of any attempt to standardize your order to cash process in the same way?
Yes. We are in a business, as I said before, we are basically renting properties. So renting properties means we are doing regular rent-up. So basically producing invoices and sending invoices to our tenants. One of the area where we improve definitely is maintaining the portfolio in our system. So to properly invoice our tenants, we need to have pretty much real-time monitoring of our portfolio. It's not something which is changing from now to the next one, but we have regular contracts being signed. We have breaks option in our leases. We are acquiring new properties. We are selling properties across the group. So we need to reflect in our database, in our systems, what the business is actually doing or signing or acquiring locally. So before, that was something which was done locally. So they were having separate database maintaining their own portfolio. Now with one unique database, in the first place, there was an interim stage where we had this ERP in place, and each local team were actually updating their data and their portfolio data in the new system. We found out that it was not really appropriate, and we had quite a lot of data improperly updated. So we decided to move to a central organization, which is based in the UK. So we have a team of people in the UK which are basically in charge of maintaining this portfolio data for all the group. And this is based on workflows. So whenever you have local business signing a new lease, let's say, then they contact this team centrally, and then they ask them to update the data centrally. So it's now one unique database, one process, and it's a shared process across the group, whereas before it was separate databases with different ways of maintaining data, and actually even the data sets were probably different from one country to the other one.
Mm-hmm. And what did you, a question from a viewer, what did you actually implement first? Was it, because obviously it was a dual approach to the solution here with it, the MRI and the Basware. What did you actually implement first and why?
So we started to implement first the MRI package, so covering the portfolio maintenance and the order to cash process and the accounting. That's what we deployed in the first place in continental Europe. Then we implemented Basware. So we replaced the purchase to pay, which actually originally was in MRI. We replaced it by Basware, and this is at this point in time where we had Basware interface with MRI in continental Europe, and then we deployed these two packages into the UK.
Okay, good. And the rationale for that was what exactly?
The rationale was accounting driven. The point, if you recall my presentation, we had a risk really, if we go backward in 2008, we faced the risk of not being able to disclose our figures and numbers, and that's very high risk, so to say, which is unacceptable for this company. So, and that was mainly due by inefficiency of the system we had in place before, and some of the processes which were really not adapted to our business. So, all system, all processes, well, say not properly maintained data. So accounting was the first brick that we put in our in place. And coming with accounting, we implemented the portfolio management, because then you have quite integrated couple of packages where you have accounts. I mean, all the order to cash process integrated with the general accounting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Also, Mark, you talked about your KPIs, made reference to them, though they're not individually. To what degree has this new system landscape had an impact on your major purchase-to-pay KPIs?
Well, I would answer more generally speaking about KPIs in general. I did not mention in the presentation, but before we were using packages like business objects, like probably most of your attendees are knowing. We removed business object and replaced it by ClickView, which is a sort of new new data warehouse, if you like, and reporting tool, which is sitting on top of our transactional systems, Basware and MRI. So we have KPIs to monitor our internal efficiency. KPIs for the pure purchase to pay process, it's something we want to develop over time. We have basic KPIs like obviously DSO or some others more accounting related or accounts payable related sort of activities, but when it comes to monitor the matching, for instance, it's something we are doing manually, and we would like to automate that a bit further. So in other terms, KPIs on the property side, KPIs for our overall organization is in place. We want to develop that more specifically for the purchase to pay area.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you talked about shared services, but you've obviously done your systems implementation first before you've done your shared services implementation. Any reason in particular why you've decided as a company to take that approach?
Well, it comes down to a critical mass. So we have well, we're operating in 8 countries with local teams, and the language barrier is somewhere preventing us, at least for now, to move forward and consolidate across the group the accounts payable activities, or maybe more generally speaking, the accounting activities. We are progressing toward that direction by having more clusters team, like in Benelux, for instance, where we have the accounting team which is covering Netherlands and Belgium. But it's just an intermediate steps. We also have a similar sort of organization in Eastern Europe, where we have an accounting team covering Czech and Poland. But it's something which is not there yet. It's really, as I said, more mid-term, long-term sort of strategy here.
Okay, good. That concludes our session for today. So Karen Airy from Basware, thank you very much indeed. And Mark Purser from Segro, thank you for sharing your story with us. If you would like to have more information about Basware, do feel free to contact Karen Airy at the contact details that are provided there. Also, just please note, we actually have our Source to Settle as a Service conference taking place in London this week, and we've got over 60 companies, end user companies, shared services organisations being represented there, about 95 delegates in total. The next event that we've got in London is on your screen now. It's the 10 Keys to Process Excellence, and that really is looking at mastering end-to-end process excellence and finance shared services, order to cash, purchase to pay, record to report. So please make sure that's in your diary, and if you are available, please do join us for that, and do contact sharedserviceslink.com to acquire a ticket. And also we've got a number of exciting webinars coming up, again very much structured to help you on your shared services journey. So with all that in mind, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention today and the time spent with our speakers, and we look forward to welcoming you next time. Goodbye.